Okay, so the people up here are up here partly because they represent strands of those three ideas that we talked about, contacting our MPs, the unlikely alliances and thinking about our relationship to our stakeholders, and then visitors, audiences and participants, and the idea of a kind of national grid of connecting those audiences. So they're up here because of that, but they're also up here because all of them hang around What Next meetings. But the most important thing here is you, and I think that's where we're going to start. So we've got 2 microphones down here in the middle, and we've got 2 microphones upstairs as well. So what I would love to do to start off with is just to hear some thoughts and responses and reactions, some ideas that you've had. The first person is, remember, going to be very brave in this moment because it's a big room. But I'd like to start seeing some hands going up, please, downstairs. There's one here. There's one, is that one just up there? If we can get a mic to this lady here, there's a microphone there. I'm going to have 3 or 4 points just to kick us off. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Deborah Mason. I just wanted to say, I think this is a fantastic thing, and I stumbled across this through my day job when I was at a meeting of open access publishers. Well, they're not open access yet, they're being forced into it by the government, and realised that there was no representation there for the arts at all. And so I looked to see whether anybody was representing the arts, and here we are. One of the things that has struck me and other people that I've talked to is that this is very organisation focused, and there isn't a huge voice here for the individual practitioner who perhaps is emerging, breaking through, who hasn't actually got to the point where they're even interacting with the organisations. And we've talked about grassroots from a kind of community, voluntary, amateur point of view, but there's a kind of grassroots of would-be professionals, trained to be professionals, who perhaps aren't quite getting the same voice and perhaps have slightly different issues, although all of it is about valuing the arts. And my second point, which is much more actually aimed towards the individual practitioner, is about intellectual property, and that the open access publishing, effectively, the government has said to researchers who are receiving government funds, your research belongs to us. You will publish it in an open access format that is open to everybody. They will be able to use your research and merely credit you. I think this sets a very dangerous precedent for government funding, particularly for artists and the arts. So, I think my warning would be, don't stick your head in the sand about intellectual property. We need to stand up for it. We need to make it part of education. If the flowers look pretty, you can look at them, but you don't pick them if they're in somebody else's garden. And a lot of kids, a lot of young people don't understand that because it's very easy to pick those flowers off the internet. So I think there's something there that, individual practitioners, perhaps should get together and perhaps have a virtual group,
Thank you very much indeed. There was somebody over here. Do please raise your hands nice and clearly if you want to speak. Thank you.
My name is Yemisai Blake. I'm one of the independent artists. What I wanted to raise was, sometimes we talk about organisations as separate from artists, as separate from audiences, but I think one of the things we need to start looking at is how, if we look at the makeup of some of the organisations, the directors are artists, the senior management team are artists, there are people who work in the organisation who are also running collectives and are working individually or as duos with other people. So I think when you're looking at one organisation, sometimes there are 3 or 4 embedded in that as well. So my question really is, what next for who? One thing I want to start talking to people about is how artists start to get involved in the conversation as well. Often our interaction only lasts for as long as a specific project lasts, and then we're involved in the next one. But in that kind of downtime, in that in-between time, we're still thinking about lots of the same things and sharing that energy of looking at what's coming next. So that's my question.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Could you hand the microphone to somebody called Rosie, who's sitting 3 seats away from you?
My thought was about the ways in which I can be effective in this movement, and it occurred to me that I've been invited here as an executive director of an organisation, but I may be able to be more effective as the mum who's the secretary of the Parents Forum at the primary school my daughter goes to.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. There's somebody up here.
Roger Tomlinson. I'm very interested in taking the whole discussion to the public and engaging the public entirely. I think that our biggest issue is winning over their hearts and minds and persuading them as voters and people who engage with our politicians as well as with us to support through their values, their local advocacy, where they live in every part of the UK.
Thank you very much. A couple more, and then, yes, over here. Oh, and a microphone here. Yep.
Marcus Stromer, could we, in the spirit of the TED model that you showed at the beginning, get better at sharing our data and using that big data really sensibly, smartly, and effectively?
Thank you. Who's on the mic? Yes, here.
Hi, Fern Potter. I'm really heartened by today. It reminds me of the early 80s in the USA when we were threatened by a complete 100% cut of the National Endowment for the Arts and managed to save it before fax was invented. But one very practical question is, the Arts Council, Why the Arts Matter Advocacy Toolkit, where is it? It's not on the Arts Council website, and I think that that would be a helpful toolkit for the campaign that we're doing now, because not everybody knows what to do in a situation like this. They knows what next steps to take. This was a very helpful tool.
Thank you very much. Just going to take a couple more points, and then I'm going to turn to my colleagues just to pick some of these threads up. Oh, sorry, it's Mag's apologies. That was entirely my fault. Can we just come straight back to you after this person? Sorry.
A couple of questions. One is, as a freelance and independent worker, as well as somebody who goes and works in organisations, I think that we ought to say that we want to be paid, and we want to be paid properly, and that those people who are educated to work in the arts and wish to work in them need to be recognised as professionals. And I think there is no funding structure at the moment that actually recognises that, and many employers don't recognise it. The trend towards interns and towards volunteers is very problematic. And I think that when we think about the future, we need to turn the funding structure upside down. So the bottom of the triangle, the wide bit, is at the top, and we see the arts as fed by participation, support, and interest from the population, not as trickled down to by the art structures. That's the first thing. The second thing is that I am chair of the Independent Theatre Arts Committee in Equity, and if we need association and mutual support as artists and workers, I think that those of us who would like that need to think about how we do it. Obviously, as an Equity member, I would like it to be through a union like Equity, but those demands and those needs would have to be made clear to Equity, which I'm very happy to do with people. But I think we do need to be together as artists in some way that we need to work out. Thanks.
Thank you, thank you. So we're going to go up here and then down to Mags, and then we have one down here. So up there first, thanks.
Hello. Oh, am I here? Hello, my name is Ben Sandbrook, and I work in creative arts education. I don't know what the makeup of today is, but if we're focusing very much on, if you like, arts for the people, the people's arts, making arts mainstream, raising the profile of arts, then it seems to me that the makeup of today and what next is principally arts organizations. It's an obvious question then, really. How do we as a group involve schools, social society, youth workers, social workers, local governments, local media, so on and so forth, all of the rest of the people, if you like, because at the moment we've got the arts organizations side of that people.
I think we would completely agree as well. I guess that's very much around that second provocation that was being made about actually how do we look out and how do we connect with those wider stakeholders. Totally agree. Mags.
This is just a point of information, which is our new refreshed arts advocacy toolkit.
Just want to say who you are, sorry.
Sorry, Mags Patton, Director of Communications at the Arts Council. So our arts advocacy toolkit will be live on our website from next Tuesday, the 7th of May. It's in dead simple language, honestly. It's not telling people what to say. We're hoping it'll just be a helpful guide for people that want to engage in advocacy in their own areas over the coming weeks and months.
There's one down here.
Hello, my name's Christina Peake. I'll be quite quick because I know you're going to get to your speakers. It's just an observation and not one that I mean to be rude in any way, but the crowd here, although very organisation-based, there doesn't seem to be that much diversity of people from all different kind of backgrounds. I don't really like use the word like ethnic minorities, but it's just one of those ones that's always on a paper somewhere that you have to tick at some point to get somewhere. And I wanted to point out, following some of the points saying about public engagement,
it's not just, say, whether it's engaging local government or central government or just the public, but also coming from an Afro-Caribbean background, for example, the arts isn't always seen by many to be even a route really as a professional career, and to really think about how you engage many different cultural groups or whatever to try and get these organisations and getting the public on side and pushing them through, because to me that seems to be a lot of power based there, and I was lucky enough to have that backing.
Thank you very much. I'm going to come straight back to the floor in just a moment. Thank you. But just going to go to David.
Just, I don't know if this is, yes, it is working. Good. Look, many different points raised there. But I think if there's a way of getting to the heart of what people are saying in different ways, is that there are things you feel individually, collectively, separately, in groups, very strongly about, and you're saying that thing needs to be done. We're saying something very, very simple. I mean, it is true we all come from organizations, we all run organizations. But hey, you know, from another perspective, we're just a bunch of people who happen to have an idea about something we wanted to try and achieve. We certainly didn't start off by saying we don't want any other kind of people to be part of the group. I guess what we're saying is, if there is something you feel powerfully about in relation to the arts and culture, do it. I mean, don't wait for us. Do it. We found a kind of a way of talking to each other by following a particular format. We wanted to pass that on. But, I mean, there are 100 different ways. The important thing is do it. Very interesting conversation we had in our group this morning from James Parnell, who used to be a Secretary of State. And as soon as James started to talk and spoke to the group about it, he was saying, look, talk to government. Now, look, we know one of the things government does is it creates tremendously complex rituals around itself to protect its power, making it very difficult for people to talk to government, to change people's ideas. But there are people who know how to do it. And if you can get one or two of those people into a group around a table often enough, things begin to happen. That's really all we're saying. We can't fix all these problems, difficulties that you're suggesting. We're really interested in them, but we're just us who happen to be here today. The point of the day is to hand it over to you.
Kenneth.
Yeah, I mean, I think Dave's absolutely right. It struck me, it came in our group discussion this morning, and people started commenting on who wasn't here. There's nothing wrong with that. It would be completely unrealistic to expect that everyone who needs to be part of this conversation would be here today. The fact is that we're recognizing that, I think we're all recognizing that there are other voices that need to be heard. There are other conversations that need to happen. There are different kinds of conversations that need to happen with different people. It was absolutely brilliant that Zimba and Dylan were here. Because if any one of us had got up and said the message that they said so clearly about the power and the importance of the role of the arts for social change, it would be heard completely differently. They will reach a completely different set of people, and they will be heard in a completely different way. And I think that's really very emblematic of what's got to happen now. Each one of us has to think about how we reach the people who are not here. I can also relate to the comment that the gentleman made and several other people made about, you know, where are the artists? Absolutely, we have to think, how do we make this conversation even relevant to them? Help them understand why they need to be part of the conversation. So I think that's part of the journey that we all have to take responsibility for right now.
Thank you. Nicola.
Our session this morning was about starting local. And actually, quite a few of the comments you've made, one might consider having a really quite local group to talk about the impact of culture in that area, and that you would have to include the social workers and the teachers and the voluntary sector and the individual artists for that to be of any meaning whatsoever. And that's just something that came out of it this morning and we've touched on before, but might be worth thinking about.
And you'll notice that on your card as well, there's a fourth action, which is a suggestion of more local groups, of setting up more local What Next groups. And so if there are people that you've met here that you've heard speak and you think, I want to connect with that person, that is one way to do it, which is to connect, to set up a group and start having those conversations. Can we go upstairs? Where are we? No? Downstairs?
It seems to be, Jim Johnson, Artistic Director and CEO. from Peshkar in Oldham, and sleep-deprived father of a 2-year-old. So I apologise. 3 things that seem to come across in the spirit of good storytelling, and in terms of the beginning of this, I think that with so many bright minds in the room, it is really important in a challenging environment that we are seen to be radical and active in whatever it is that we do. I think that's really, really important. Secondly, I think in order to make a coherent statement about whatever it is we believe what next to be, in the spirit of good PR, we need to articulate. I used the example this morning in our breakout group about Don Draper from Mad Men saying we need to change the conversation if we don't like what they're saying. And thirdly, after that understanding what that radicalism is and articulating correctly our conversation point, we need to make sure that each and every one of us in the room, and it echoes everything we're saying about lack of engagement and those voices that aren't heard, that we become the resistance movement in our constituencies.
Thank you. There's somebody downstairs and then one upstairs. So downstairs, then up.
No, hi, I'm Rebecca Swift. I'm holding all my items of clothing, slightly awkward. No, just a really, really quick one, just to say that the guys in the front and Penny, the Birmingham gentleman that I'm looking at now, that was, I mean, I've been around in the arts for so long, I've been brought up by artists, blah, but that to me, you know, it made me cry. I honestly think we should just send them off to David Cameron tomorrow and problem solved. I'm not altogether joking. I'm sure that stories like that, whereby the artist has been identified as somebody who can navigate a space that isn't otherwise available to people in a situation that's extreme, is more powerful to me than so many other kinds of argument. But I know all the other bits have to be put together. But equally, case history is so brilliant.
Thank you very much.
Ruth from Arcola Theatre. A more sort of practical suggestion. We've talked a lot about how can we do this, how can we reach more people and do this engagement. For me, one of the exciting things that's come out of using digital technology is online campaigning. So we have organizations like 38 Degrees. They do the work, they do the petition, they draft the letter to the MP, they email you, they say, put your name on here, and it goes out, and it's thousands and thousands of people. I think that's very powerful. They've been really successful in other campaigning sites as well. So my suggestion would be, let's do some of this.
Nicola.
Can I just answer that one straight away? Because we've talked about this and we've talked to MPs about this. And their feedback to us is that they've got used to it now. It doesn't have the impact. The greatest impact is 2 people walking into their surgery on a Saturday morning or a Friday afternoon and saying, we really care about something. Would you like to come and see it too? And they said, be careful about those online petitions. They're just put in the online petition box, whereas constituents get much more result. It's much harder work. But then there are 650 of us here.
Lizzie.
Yeah, I just want to come on. Hello. I just wanted to talk to Jim about being radical, because I completely agree that quite a lot of the time, particularly when we're in times of straitened times, not a lot of resource, people are feeling threatened, we're in a difficult place and change is happening. We get stuck in a conversation about what was and the status quo, and trying to protect or trying to sort of find our way in that space, when really we should be here and we should be imagining the best possible future we possibly can and tracking back from that to make a reality. And I think that's such a hard thing to do for all of us when there's so many pressures to try to keep us in this space, but I think it's absolutely critical.
Kenneth.
Is that better? Yeah, just before we moved on, there were a couple of points made that I didn't get picked up on. The lady that was talking about, I think, unpaid internships. amongst other things, and being paid properly. I'm sure, in a way, I'm disappointed. Not that your perception is that we're still going in the wrong direction, because all the conversations that I have with people is that is a huge issue to be addressed. In my session this morning, we had a young man who works with the Lewisham Young Mayor, and the issue of youth employment is the biggest issue for those young people, and the arts are making a hugely important intervention in those young people's lives. So I think you're absolutely right to raise it. And Marcus made a point about data, which I really just want to ask with a question. It's not because I disagree, but could you say a little bit more about why you think that data sharing is so important? If there's a microphone anywhere near for Mark. Is it Marcus Roma? It's funny how I've never met Marcus, but I recognize his face from Twitter.
Likewise, hi Kenneth. What it was is, as public organisations that are publicly funded, why do we always have this lockdown on mailing lists and all of that sort of stuff? It's about opening up those issues around sharing the information that we hold as organisations, because in fact these people are our fans and are our supporters, and it's how we can utilise that. We know data protection exists, but also we have to work around some of those things by thinking more smartly about how we want to ask people the permission to be able to use their information for the mailing outs that were mentioned earlier on the platform.
How do we do that? Has anybody got any specific ideas about how do we do that? So I think that's one of the key parts of these What Next conversations, is it's the idea, but then it's actually how do you do that? And if people have got ideas about that, we should follow through on that. Somebody who's going to speak down here.
Well, I've actually worked quite a bit in direct marketing, and simply you just do a opt-in to our friends, partners, any other thing that might be of interest. Once you've done that, that's the only requirement. If you don't, if we just start giving everyone our mailing list, then we get in a lot of trouble. But it's that simple. Just making sure that our supporters want to receive that information.
Upstairs.
Hi there. I just wanted to perhaps reiterate a message that we've already been sharing and just draw it out, which is that it seems to me that it's important that our story is a really positive one, and that I think it's difficult for us to be arguing for the value of culture for society. You know, we don't argue the value of roads for transport or the value of air for breathing, and that it's important that we keep this conversation, we don't adopt a position of victimhood, and that we keep this conversation really positive, and that it's about our hope and our responsibility. And I really, really wanted to sort of validate the perspective that I've been hearing, which is that we need to give our audiences, our families, our communities sovereignty over this issue, give them a voice, enable them not to speak for us, but to speak for themselves and their own right and the things they value. And each of us can be really powerful advocate when somebody makes a clear request of us to advocate. If somebody tells me what to say and who to say it to, I'll do that with joy if it helps an organisation I love. And so I think I really think a really powerful and useful strategy that we've been talking about today, to give the people that love us a voice and enable them to speak on, not on our behalf, but on their behalf about this thing that is part of life.
Yeah. Dave.
Just to come back on that point there, Sir Richard Leese, who was talking in our conversation this morning, was asked a question about how a Labour authority like Manchester, it's been Labour for over 30 years, I think, can have meaningful conversations with successive governments, I think all of which it's had disagreements with, even the last Labour administration, and it's diametrically opposed to what's happening at the moment. Yet Sir Richard Leese and Sir Howard Bernstein, Sir Richard's the leader and Sir Howard's the chief executive, are invited regularly to be part of government working parties, etc. And he said it's because we've got something to offer. We're getting involved in that, in government agendas, because we have something to offer. And you can then start to bring about those things which you value as part of that overall conversation. Well, we've got something to offer. uniformly. Artists have got something to offer, and we need to make sure we're part of that conversation in a very constructive and positive way, as you're suggesting, to make sure that we're pointing in that direction. And that's what motivates me to be part of What Next. We have something to offer.
And I think picking up on that, it's this idea of sort of who's in the room in every context that you're part of. And I think What Next, with its question mark, is a tremendous title, because it must be the question they're asking in number 10 Downing Street all the time. What next? It implies a sense of policy movement. It implies a sense that the arts and culture can contribute seriously to where we're going and shaping that agenda. But it's not going to mean anything if there isn't a continuing culture shift within organisations, which actually I think we are all part of, and What Next will, in a sense, run with it and sort of through it. I can't see What Next as some sort of separate thinking or place or activity or movement outside of a continuing culture shift, which is about asking, who are we speaking to? Who are we really speaking to? Are we only speaking to our existing audiences, or are we giving actually more time to those who don't know anything about us?
We've got about 15 minutes left, so I'm going to come out to some other people, but just to have that in your minds, because we do need to answer that question, what next? Collectively, what next for us? What next for What Next?
Hello?
Yeah. Sorry, the mic's not working yet, sorry. Have we got somebody else mic'd up, and we'll come back to you? Two here. Thank you.
Hello. Amelia Bird from Gamito Productions. Just to follow on from Andrew's point about who we're speaking to, I think we've talked about talking to politicians and local authorities and to existing audiences. But I think there's much more that we need to do about talking to audiences who don't attend at the moment. There's no theatre which is 100% full. There's no art gallery which has 100% attendance. And I have a small but growing mailing list as an action of people who are interested in starting a PR campaign for theatre, which is bringing things together. I'm sorry that it's only theatre, that's just my background. If anyone would like to join that and know more and perhaps start a smaller action group on that, if they'd like to email amelia@gamito.co.uk or find my face today.
Thank you very much.
Is it now on? Hello. Samuel West, National Campaign for the Arts. It's nice to be here. I have a question for the room, picking up on what Amelia's just said. If we're here to discuss a public-facing campaign, as a useful start, is there anyone in this room who would like to make a film, not about people who think the arts are marvellous, because we all think that, people who think the arts are irrelevant, say it's all poncy wank, and wouldn't be seen dead in a room like this? Because those are the people we need to be talking to. We need to know those people and their arguments. They're not our enemies, at least not until they decide to change their minds. There are filmmakers in this room. If anybody wants me to do the voiceover, I'll do it for nothing. Thank you.
Thank you. Different. Yeah, go for it. This one, please.
Hello.
Yeah.
I'm Jenny, and I wanted to say about picking up on your point about people that aren't here. And for those that know me, I've been working in the arts for 20 years, and I predominantly work with black creatives. But you probably don't know me because the people I work with aren't here. So what defines the group that I work with mainly is that there is very little infrastructure. And without infrastructure, it's very difficult to have a meeting without access to a room, because I'm tired of having a meeting in Nero's. And without access to administration, so there's a point here about, yes, some voices are heard, and yes, it's up to us to go out there and do what we feel passionate about. But I'm going to ask about this thing about we, and about the share, and about sharing resources so that everybody has access to the same thing, and that's equality. So that's all I wanted to say. And maybe the what next is that we look at practical ways to share resource.
Thank you. Going to come to you straight after this fellow, Rose.
Hello. Yeah, I just want to say this is very important what you lot are doing, but it's only important if we put words into actions. Also, we would like to, 1 mile away, would like to bring What Next to Birmingham. Could you help and support us in doing that?
Yes. Thank you. Rose, sorry for the delay.
That's okay. Thanks, David. Rose Fenton from Free Word. This is a very practical suggestion. How do we talk to government? There are existing events happening, including Parliament Week this November. It happens every year, and it's all about how does Parliament get more young people engaging in democratic processes. We've just heard some fantastic testimonies from young people about the power of the art and the voices that can be heard through the arts, and that leads directly into democratic processes. It seems to me that it could be a suggestion to Parliament Week that they include all the programmes that many of us organisations are doing with young people in schools, in communities, in our theatres, and celebrate that as part of Parliament Week.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Time for about 2 more, so wave those hands at me, please.
Sorry, just switching off. Don't want to get feedback. Richard Lee, German Space, but speaking as a member of the audience. Can you hear me? Yes. I can't hear me. I'm very much... Sorry? Stand up. Hello. I'm very mindful of what Marcus said about data, because without data we're nothing. I'm very, very mindful, thank you for what Amelia said about the unidentified audience. And I think that is the biggest issue we have, the movers who we don't see moving. And there must be, every venue in this represented here, there must be a list that's hiding at the bottom of your database about those people who no longer come. They no longer go. And do you know why? Is it your program? Is it your venue? Is it the space where you make the stuff? Can they get to it, either by understanding it, by having it revealed, or simply by seeing or hearing it? If you haven't identified that, then that great chunk of audience, we don't know how big it is not going to be speaking for you to your MPs. They will not be part of what's next. So please connect the data and the venues and make everything that you do, I was going to say accessible, but I will say inclusive.
Thank you very much. We're going to go up here and then down to Dave, and then we're almost on our last speaker there. So, yes, please.
Hi, my name's Charlie Morrison. Just talking about people who are missing from the room, an obvious one for me is the rest of our staff, because there's just a couple of people here from our organisation, and actually this is still very much a concept which a lot of people who we work with every day aren't aware of. And so getting their buy-in and helping them to go out and work with people in the public, knowing this message and knowing that the betterment of the cultural sector as a whole is something that we can work towards quite easily, is going to be an important first step when I go back to the office.
Thank you very much for that. Absolutely, something we can all take back. Dave.
Just a quick one about, hello? Yeah, just a quick one about speaking to government from what Rose said earlier. Is that the party conference season will be upon us in the autumn, and we've traditionally in Manchester had a fringe event alongside whichever parties in town. The Tories are in town this year. We'll be doing a What Next style conversation as part of the party conference fringe event season. There's another conference taking place in Brighton, another one in Glasgow. We need to see that sort of action, engaging politicians at those sorts of events, as well as directly in other places. So watch out for those.
Thank you very much. Lucy.
Lucy Neal. A really exciting movement got going in this country a few years back, led by Platform, by Tipping Point, by Cape Farewell, by Julie's Bicycle, which really awoke the cultural sector to the creative response that they could be making to the big global challenges that are faced in energy terms and environment and economy. And that movement's ongoing, and we're all part of it. And it's very dynamic and real about making a coherent sense of the world we live in and the way in our communities and on the ground as creative people we can work with. If we're talking about policy, one of the very, I feel, sure-footed ways that we could move is to begin to see if we can draw together a single framework that is not just talking to DCMS, but asking how we create across energy, across housing, across education. We have to move in that direction. We're talking about the values we have as society, how we will reinvent the way we live. And that movement's there, and I just wanted to bring it into the room.
Thank you very much indeed.
I've been told to stand up, so this is a movement. Vicky Ireland. The other people who aren't in the room, of course, and who never have a voice are children. And please keep them in your thinking. Children are so precious in our society. We learn so much in the first years of life. All that emotional complexity is laid down. We must include them in our thinking, and they can be a vote catcher in the sense that if parents think their children are missing out, they will do something about it. So I think it's like Jesuits. Give me the child, I'll give you the man. Please, arts for children, early art. Thank you.
Thank you. We have two children here. You are. Okay, a last comment from, are we downstairs or upstairs? Big hands, big hands. Okay, very good.
Try and stand up. My name's Sinead Greenaway, and I'm a board member for the Royal Exchange, and I'm sat next to my executive director, Fiona. And I think that's really important. Just as another practical point, the makeup of your boards, think long and hard about the people you invite into the room. Even if you're a one-man band, you can have a board who can contribute, but use us as evangelists and let us ask the difficult questions. That's what we're here for, and that's what I certainly try and do with Fiona and the team, and that makes for a really rich, healthy environment within the Royal Exchange.
Thank you very, very much. I want to take a note from Vicky about getting on her feet and starting a movement now, and also from Dylan and Zimbo, who said that if anything is going to come out of today, it has to be action. It can't just be more conversations. Conversations are critical, but actions must follow. So you have one of these, and hopefully you've still got it, and hopefully you might have put something on it that you want to carry out as an action. But I just want to see, I think it would just be interesting to get a sense in the room, I guess, of where people are at in terms of how you might take action. We're thinking that in 6 months' time we might meet again. Maybe it will be completely different by then. Maybe we'll have doubled in number. Maybe we'll be in a different kind of space. Who knows what will happen? But we would like to meet again in 6 months' time. But between now and then, we want to carry out actions. So the first action that you heard about today is contacting your MP, is getting a relationship with your MP. And I'm not going to repeat all of the very brilliant things that have been said both here and out on the floor. If you are going to do that, or if you feel motivated to do that between now and in 6 months' time, could I ask you to stand up? Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Please sit down. Thank you. You're going to hate me now because I'm going to do it again. Sorry. But you've also heard about stakeholders. You've also heard about reaching out to a wider group of stakeholders in our community, much of which people in this room already do. But if you've heard something this afternoon where you could push that further in terms of relating to head teachers or local business people or people in the community that you work with as an individual artist or as an organisation, and you feel like that you could take that further in the next 6 months, can I ask you to stand up now? Thank you very much. Mate, I feel like I should shout out some of the names of people who are standing up. It's great. Thank you very much. Okay, this is not going to go on forever, I promise you. The final thing is we talked about, well, actually, almost the final thing, is we talked about the idea of connecting our audiences. Marcus just talked about that really eloquently. We have to think about how we do that, and there are mechanisms that we need to find in order to do that. If you feel like in the next 6 months that you feel that you want to do that and you want to join up our visitors, our audiences, and our participants, please stand up now. I think we have started a movement. I mean, lots of movements. Thanks very much. Sit down. I'm not going to ask you to do that again. I could carry on because there are a couple more, but I feel like I would probably be straining people's patience. But what I would just say is that there is one on here which is about starting your own What Next group. If you feel that you want to join up and connect with other people in your area, then we would encourage you to start a What Next group. You can email the address at whatnextculture.co.uk to let other people know that that is happening. But we would love you, if you would be interested to do that, to set up a group of your own, and indeed to carry out the other actions that you may well have written on your cards, things that you want to carry out between now. And I would just, between now and when, I would just remind you that this is not between now and the next 3 months. It is then. It is about the next 3 months, and it is about an urgency, but it's also about the next 3 years. In fact, it's also about the next 30 years. This is a long-term conversation and set of actions. If you're interested in setting up, I'm not going to get you to stand up, I promise. If you're interested in setting up your own What Next group, or you've got an action that you yourself have put up, can you put up one hand or two hands for either of those, please? So one hand for I have made a terrible mess of that, haven't I? What a shambles. This is a problem, not rehearsing. So yeah, if you would like to set up your own What Next group, or you have an, oh God, get off! You get the idea. Put your hand up. Yay! Okay, thank you. We have to get out of this theatre quite quickly because there is going to be a show on in here this evening. Can I just thank hugely again NIMAX for sponsoring, supporting this by providing us with their theatre. You don't have to go out onto the street. You can now go back into those tea and coffee bars where you were before to continue the conversation. I'm just going to go and have a nightmare about that last 5 minutes. Okay, thanks very much. Cheers.